Welcome back. It's 7:31. New CSO figures, they came out last week. They revealed that food and drink prices have risen by 4.6% in the last year.
Yes, and here to discuss this is Economist Dr. Emma Howard. Good morning to you.
Hi, Emma.
Emma, thanks for joining us. So the prices, we're all seeing it in the supermarkets. Can you go through this survey and pick out some of the main points for us?
Yeah, so what the CSO figures showed us the last couple of days when they were published is that although inflation has stabilised at 1.8%, which is around what, 2% or below is what we'd like to see inflation at, grocery inflation is more than double that. So it's 4.6% is the average rise in the cost of groceries in the last year. Now, within those figures, there's lots of different variations because what they do when they're monitoring those average price levels is they take a kind of a typical basket of goods that your household in Ireland might buy and they look at what's happened to the prices of those goods, again, on average across the whole country. So, if you're buying a pint, for example, in Temple Bar, you're going to pay a lot more for it than you would for a pint in a rural pub in Clare or somewhere. But on average, those have gone up 4.6%.
Why?
Well, lots of different reasons. So if you delve into those figures and see where the biggest price increases, so what's feeding into that the most, meat has gone up by a lot, particularly beef is up 22%. Dairy products have gone up a lot, so the price of butter has gone up nearly 19% in the last year. Milk has gone up about 14%. Coffee has gone up about 8% in the last year. So there's various factors. A lot of those food products, we're dependent on the supply that comes from the production of those food products, and we've got an increase in extreme weather events.
So are the people
change.
Supplying those products saying it's more expensive for them to make them, so that's why it's gone up in price?
More expensive, or we're seeing yields of crops reducing.
Yes.
So coffee, for example, this is a global issue, right? So coffee is something that's not an Irish problem in particular because we've seen a lot of droughts and a lot of floods in coffee producing countries. Cocoa beans is the same, so you might have noticed the cost of chocolate has gone up a lot as well. And when there's adverse weather conditions, these extreme weather events from climate change that reduce the yield, that means there's a lower supply. So, if everyone wants their coffee and there's less coffee on the market, that price is going to go up.
And then demand, of course, is going up globally as well as people's diets change, as we become more globalised, right?
Exactly.
So we're all fighting for a smaller part of the pie.
Completely.
Right.
So there's global issues when it comes to things like coffee or cocoa beans that are produced internationally. Stuff that we produce in Ireland, like our meat and our dairy, actually we export a huge amount of that. We export the vast majority, 85% of our meat and dairy. So if global prices are going up, farmers are going to demand similar prices to sell their products here.
So are you saying that farmers are getting those prices for it when they export them, so they want that same price in here? So it's not necessarily what it's costing. Yeah, it's costing them more. But then is that not greed?
You know what? It's subjective, right? So people, I think, like to talk about price gouging. It's that sensationalist term you see about, are supermarkets price gouging? Are they making big profits? It is supply and demand. And at the end of the day, people are making an income. These are private enterprises. So if there's an increased demand for products, supply will go up. Now, having said that,
supermarkets will deny that there's price gouging going on.
And that's a sort of a subjective, that depends on what profit you think is a reasonable profit. But costs have gone up. So if you look at farmers, for example, farm incomes have gone up 50% in the last year. But we know that costs have gone up. So things like fertiliser costs and so on have also gone up. Supermarkets, similarly, if you look at the cost of things in Ireland, so, in Ireland, we're the second highest price level in Europe. We're the second most expensive economy in Europe. And a lot of that is because we've got higher labour costs. We'll have higher rents for premises. So there are inputs that are more expensive here that drive up the prices
Because
as well.
just very quickly, last Friday there was an awful lot of text received to the show about this and how people are struggling with the cost of food. But in Ireland, salaries are currently outpacing inflation. How much are they outpacing inflation?
Yeah, so we have, this year we're expected to see 3.5% real income growth. So in other words, although prices are going up, our incomes are going up to compensate us. So our disposable income will actually be higher this year than previous years. Again, on average, right? And this is the important thing. The averages hide a lot. So again, if you look at us in the European context, we have the third highest wages in Europe. So although our prices are about 38% higher than the European average, our wages are 55% higher. So if you're an average worker or you're on that top end of the income distribution, you're well able to afford these price increases, and you're driving those price increases.
You're driving them up.
Exactly, because you have the money that you're spending.
But there are a lot of people living in poverty in this country. We would love to hear from you. This is our proper breakdown from Emma Howard here of what is actually going on, and there's so many other factors. 089 611 111 to what's going on in your house when you do the food shop in your kitchen. We would love to hear from you. Tommy is in the kitchen. He's getting the 101 on the food bill.
Thank you. Yes, I'm with Edward Hayden, who's going to show us some savvy ways to reduce your weekly food shop. Good morning to you, Edward. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Tommy. How are you?
Right, as a chef, what have you noticed some of the biggest price increases over the last couple of years?
Well, listen, as Emma said, certainly the cost of your average shop, you know, when you go to the shop to get your basket or your trolley, it certainly has gone up significantly. So as she said, things like your dairy products, your meat, all of that sort of thing have had a big increase. What I thought I might just give you is a little whistle-stop tour of a few little, I don't know whether you want to call them tricks or whatever.
No, definitely anything, because there's a lot of people.
So I've just done a little mini shop here from my two local supermarkets. So again, things like, you know, the larger joint of ham, you know, you're coming in maybe just upwards of €6. But again, in terms of the ability to feed your family, it just stretches a little bit more. You do have your leftovers and things like that.
So buy the joint of ham.
Buy the joint of ham, boil it for your dinner, do your cabbage or whatever you want with it, and then you have it for your sandwiches and things like that. Or chop it up tomorrow and mix it in and make a carbonara or something like that.
Kids
out of it
will be at summer camps, will need
all
their packed
that,
lunches,
sandwiches and packed lunch. Again, in terms of leftovers, sometimes we can get hung up on leftovers. You know, I suppose what I'd be suggesting is maybe to cook a little bit more frugally so that you don't have that same big tranche of leftovers to be trying to use up and upcycle. Again, things like the cheaper cuts of meat. So I've brought some in, so I know the beef has gone up, but I suppose what it does have the capacity to do is to stretch a little bit further. Things like pork belly. Again, what it requires is probably requires a little bit of more knowledge and education in terms of how to cook it properly. Sometimes I know my butcher would always say that people tend to go for the more prime cuts, the chicken fillets, the pork chops, the steaks, because of their knowledge level. So we probably need to increase that.
With the mince, when you're cooking that, can't you replace some of that with like lentils?
Of course you can, 100%.
Kind of spread it out
to stretch it out, or bulk it up with vegetables. Think of buying things like, you know, your multi-packs. Sometimes your multi-packs are really great value. Also, I have here like a soup plate. You know, sometimes buying all of your different bits of vegetables, turning that into a lovely soup or a kind of a stew or something, or mixing it in with your mince to kind of make that, just stretches it all out as well.
Do you find when you get a lot of these, like, look at the amount of celery you're going to get there, to use all of that?
Now,
that's wasted.
The two things I wanted to tell you around that, either you can use that for your vegetable piece, or a lot of the supermarkets, in fairness, have like a soup bag mix, which I would never have a problem buying, you know, because then, of course, you're using it all. I've also brought some foods that have that high satiety value. And again, that gives us that sense of fullness. So you're thinking, obviously, your pastas. I've got some lentils. I've got some potatoes. I've also suggested, you know, buy some of the home brand. So again, I've got some home brand buttermilk here, mixing with your flour and your bread soda and your salt, making your bread as opposed to buying your bread. Things like your porridge oats as well. And again, bulk up. I'm going to do a recipe a little bit later on, but bulking up on your beans and lentils and things like chickpeas and all of that sort of thing. But notwithstanding all of that, shopping is now very expensive, so it's just to try and get a few tricks around that.
Because this is all healthy stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm finding it's the healthy stuff that is the prices seem to be going up at the minute more than anything else.
I suppose, but what we also have to kind of, I suppose, balance is, you know, what we're putting into our body and the food intake around that as well. I mean, again, what I'm suggesting...
It's easy to buy the cheaper frozen stuff, and people will be forced to go for that food as opposed to having food with high nutritional value in it.
Absolutely, but I suppose you can kind of counterbalance that with the fact that convenience comes at a cost as well. So a lot of the convenience products that are already done for you, kind of that cost has to be added on as well. Again, the convenience size, sometimes the unit price, if we're talking about our ham, if we're talking about any of our kind of large bulk items, sometimes the unit price, it's actually, I suppose, more cost efficient to buy them in bulk rather than buying the convenient sizes there as well.
Okay, well, listen, you're going to be hanging around. What do we have on the menu?
I'm going to do a kind of, going to limit meat, so sometimes limiting meat as well. Emma was saying about the cost of meat going up, so I'm going to do a vegetarian option for this. You know, the Meat-Free Monday became a very big thing a number of years ago around the whole notion of climate change. Now we're coming at it from a whole different viewpoint.
Edward Hayden, as ever, great to have you with us. Let us know, 0896 111 111. Have you tried to do this? How much has it impacted your weekly shop? We'd love to hear from you. Now, coming up after break, we're going to look at the morning's other top headlines. We'll see you back here shortly.